Hello, everyone. Welcome to another installment of Open Air presented by the Harvey B. Gantt Center in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm Dexter Wemberly, and I'm incredibly thrilled about today's guest. Best recognized for his powerful portraiture and figurative work, Khalif Tahir Thompson incorporates painting, drawing, collage, printmaking, and papermaking into his practice while exploring notions of self through the scope of race, sexuality, and spirituality. He earned an MFA in painting printmaking from Yale University School of Art following a Bachelor of Fine Arts from Purchase College, and completed a fellowship at the EFA Robert Blackburn Printmaking Workshop in New York City, the Vermont Studio Center, and the Jerome Emerging Artist Residency at the Anderson Center. He is a 2022 resident of Black Rock, Senegal. Thompson is represented by Zidoun Bossuyt Gallery, where he presented his first solo exhibition in Luxembourg in September 2023, a solo exhibition in Dubai also in 2023, and in Paris in 2024. His work has been on view at the St. Louis Art Museum, Perez Art Museum in Miami, the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art in Kansas City, the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, Kalamazoo Institute of Arts, Virginia Museum of Arts, and the Indianapolis Museum of Art at Newfields, among others. Thompson's current exhibition, Cherry, is on view at the Harvey B. Gantt Center through August 17, 2025. Without further ado, let's welcome Khalif Tahir Thompson to today's Open Air. How are you?
Hello. that was nice and long.
Yeah. Well, actually, I could have gone on, but I figured people didn't come here to listen to me read your bio. They came here to listen to you talk about your work.
It's true.
But it's always good to get grounded to sort of understand the basic backgrounds of someone's career. But as bios go, it's always slightly different from how an artist would talk about themselves. So I'd love if you could, since you're here present, if you could just take a moment and introduce yourself the way you normally would. Certainly, it would be different from reading your bio.
Totally. My name is Khalif Tahir Thompson, and I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and I'm an artist. I'm a painter, and do a whole lot of other things too. But I am most confidently a painter, and I've been working professionally and doing schooling with art my whole life, pretty much. So yeah.
Well, I don't know how many people joining us or people who will watch this in the future are very familiar with your work. I've been following your career for the past few years. Certainly,
Hmm.
quite a lot has happened. As someone who deals with the figure, meaning your work and figurative work, I want to kind of jump to the subject matter. So you often depict those who are close to you, like family and friends, alongside some cultural figures. In fact, I think one of the first works I've ever seen by you was a portrait you had done of James Baldwin. So, what guides your decision making when you're choosing a subject for a work?
Totally. Yeah. So, I mean, that James Baldwin work was actually a commission all those years ago, and it really was resonated with a lot of people. And I was working with cultural figures, but mostly had sitters at that time. And so, a lot of the time, I mean, I would just like in the vein of, Alice Neal and Lucian Freud, and just and like working with subject that are close to me in terms of just the medium, in terms of the expressive portrait. Always felt like having some type of connection in some way with the sitter or the subject is like it lends itself to the painting of it, because there's a bit of more of a weight to it, where not only do you want to make it good, but you are also like painting or making those strokes from a personal place. So it's kind of like very now, and very direct, and very and it records life. So
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And so most of the works that I've seen that you've created, while it will have a figure or be a portrait, there's certainly a lot of other things going on around the figure and the environment. So how do you approach building the sort of constructed settings around your figures, and what role do these environments play in the way you want to shape the perception of the subject? Because you're not just painting someone in a void, you're putting them in an environment.
no, totally. I mean, yeah, that was something that was very pivotal in my work in its early stages, where I think I had a professor that told me I had an affinity towards naturalism, and just like the portrait and the figure and just my paint. So that came very natural to me. And a lot of the times, it would be the main focus. And so my professor, they told me, they were like, well, if you want to just do that, because sometimes when I did things in the background, or what would be considered the background, it'd be like, oh, well, it seems like the figure's the most considered, and there was an imbalance. And so a lot of the time, it was usually just focused on the figure that was the most, elaborate, or, and I had to have a little, one-on-one with myself, and be like, yeah, I do just care about the figure in these paintings, but how can I branch that out, unless I wanted to just localize it, which is like, someone like Barkley Hendricks, or other artists that just kind of like, focused on the clothing and the figure, but I was concerned with environments and settings, and just building atmosphere and texture, and the paint being as paint and form. And so it was kind of like I had to like implement that with the figure. And so finding that balance, like, through for me, it was abstraction. It was kind of like merging the portraiture and the figuration with the abstraction. And like the most the biggest example I had at that time that kind of inspired me was Kerry James Marshall. And so then I was like, oh wow, like, he's working with the figure, and he's like incorporating all these other things, and that he cares about, or that he's interested in. And it almost like, yeah, again, like it like leaves reality a few, like, in moments in the painting and on the surface. And I was really inspired by that, and I was like, okay, well, I can do that too. I could find departures where, yes, it's the subjectivity, but how do I make the everything balanced in the foreground, or what's in the background, or surrounding the figure, should I say, is as considered as the figure, so that there's more of a flow of across the canvas. So it kind of was just like a something I did. Mm-hmm.
Well, you mentioned something one of your professors or maybe multiple teachers had said to you. Can you talk a little bit about your academic experience and how that has impacted the way you see yourself as an artist? Certainly, before one goes to an MFA program, I'm sure there's sort of one way of thinking about things, and then those ways of thinking could get challenged or perhaps even fortified. So, can you talk a little bit about that?
Totally. I always, credit the schooling and the structure of, working within an institution as kind of like what's got me serious, so to speak. I was always, involved in programming, Brooklyn Museum. I did those programs, Cooper Union Saturday program, and I went to LaGuardia High School for performing arts, and I majored in art there. And that was like my first, like, I'm an art major, experience, and kind of like, I'm serious about this. But I was very ambitious, and I was very, like, concerned with getting better, or just working. And so I kind of like always found that structure there, because and personally it was a lot of not structure. So it was kind of like being good at something and being able to work on it and having the space to do it, and also, you're kind of like, you know having someone sit you down, for the most part, just to do anything. It was like super super liberating. So it was kind of like each time it was just important for me to make it meaningful. And so by the time I got out of high school and went to college, I was, again, I was serious about doing something. I really wanted to do either journalism, or work with something, obviously teach and things like that. But I like went to SUNY Purchase, and that was like a huge moment for me in my journey, artistic journey, because I learned how to build stretcher bars, and I learned how to make my own paint, and I learned how to. I took sculpture. I took graphic design classes. I mean, things typical of the bachelor's in the fine arts, and so those things kind of just introduced me to a lot. I mean, that's where I started paper making and collaging and learning about contemporary artists, and that kind of gave me an avenue to where, oh, I can do this too. I'm interested in this, and I'm passionate about it, and I can uh, uh, you know use this time to really build myself, and not think about everything else, like job or money and things like that. It was like, I'm here, and I have this canvas, and what am I going to do with it? And so I kind of just did that there. And then I graduated in 2018. So those following years, I had my Whole Foods job and my coffee job, and I was just kind of like still painting in my mom's apartment, and I was just kind of like doing commissions. So that's kind of where the James Baldwin came around, because I was just, yeah, like, keeping myself involved. And so when I did the residency at Blackburn, the printmaking residency, that was just a way to stay involved and keep working. And by that time of COVID, I mean, that's when I really started to really paint, which is crazy because it was such a crazy time. But I got another fire in me. I guess something in that stress and in that just personal struggle that we all were dealing with at that time. You're kind of like, you know, you just want to either, fight or flight. So I just chose to fly, and just, kind of, just go for it. And that's how I got to Yale. I mean, when I applied for Yale, because it was a lottery ticket. I mean, I wasn't particularly super like confident that I was going to get in. And then I also wasn't, at that time I was working, I was, still painting more than I was before. So I was happy what I was doing, but I did want to have that structure again. It had been 4 years since I graduated my BFA. So I kind of was like, okay, I want to I want to tackle this again. I have more confidence, and
Right.
they tell you, they break you down, and you leave there crying and things like that. And I wanted to go into that and see what it was like. So I kind of was like, and it's Yale, so I was like, why not? Make mom proud and everything. So yeah.
Well, well, clearly, as I mentioned before, a lot has happened in your career in the past few years. But can you kind of take us back to what even brought you to making art? Like, what was that moment, or is there no moment, but it's something you've always been doing?
Yeah, there's no moment. I mean, it always happened. I always talk about my brothers and my uncle and my just in my family. It's a very creative family, and I remember drawing, from the age of 3 or 4, and just like being proud of it. So it was like a thing. My brother went to Brooklyn High School of the Art. Both my brothers, and they went and exhibited and they drew, and I far surpassed them by now, but I was very inspired by them. you know um what's to call it? That was a joke, by the way. But what's to call it? I was very interested in this art as something fine, or something with grandeur, and kind of like this pull to it. And it also came with the wine and the cheese and the cookies and stuff. I was very excited about that from like 8 or 9 years old. So I was like, okay, this is something I can do, because I wasn't really good with a lot of other subjects like math or, things like that. I love writing, but I was like, with art, I was always very focused and very excited. So I was kind of like, okay, well, I just need to put all my eggs in this basket. So, yeah, so it was like always just something that I did, at least to, feel good about myself.
Sure, sure. Well, let's talk a little bit about the actual process of making your work. So your work incorporates materials like rust and denim and silk and handmade paper. So, like, what does this wide range of textures and media add to your work? Like, why those materials or media?
So yeah, that started with actually like I mean, as we know, supplies is expensive, and at a certain point, I had you have to get creative, for lack of a better word. And I remember like at the time, like I think I was really into Ramar Bearden, and I was looking at a lot of artists that kind of use unconventional materials, and and what I had during my residency, I actually was able to go to Material for the Arts in Queens, and where they give you all that free supply, so you can just go through all that stuff. And there's just notebooks, and there's music pads, and all types of fabrics, and paper, and just like construction paper. And for me, I always was interested in collage. And so with that material, it was kind of like what about this material will adds to the piece, especially with the expressive part of the portrait and things like that. Like I've always painted in a very like a faceted way, like the portrait itself, and there's layers to it. I work with wet into wet, and so to me it was like the material was just another agency of paint. And so it was like kind of like, and the silk versus the papyrus, and the pleather versus the leather. Like you just kind of like develop a relationship of material where they're kind of doing what you want them to do, like haptically, like sensorily, um, like people have a relationship to material itself, like fabric and stuff, and kind of using it in a way to take you there, coupled with the painted portrait. I felt like it was just like a way of interweaving a lot of cool different material into something that's at large, or just has its own sensorial effect, so that you're connected even more physically to the painting versus just through the illusion that you produce with the paint.
Sure, sure. That's really informative. And so I want to talk about the handmade paper aspect a little bit more. So, like, how did you begin using the handmade paper in your work?
Yeah, that was I learned paper making in a purchase, and I was so excited. I was like, I was like super excited to uh, uh, be able to get in. I had so many studio classes at that point, and paper making for some reason it was new, and it was very competitive to get in because everybody wanted to take the new course. And but I knew I wanted to take it because I was really interested in that medium because of the historical aspect to it, and also the tactile, nature of it. Like making your own material. I took materials and techniques around that time as well, where, like I said, I was making my own paints and watercolors and oil paints and my own gesso and learning about rabbit skin glue and things like that. So this kind of like almost like farmer, uh, like a disposition towards material where I was like, okay, well, I want to make my own paper, like how does that work? And so I took that and I took it 3 times. I was in advanced paper making by the time I graduated, and I learned all about kozo fiber and abaca and cotton and hemp fiber and all fiber, really the newsprint fiber and making paper. I mean, it's a very accessible medium, and so for me, it's also very malleable. So for me, I didn't want it to be gimmicky or anything that was to A to B. I wanted to kind of develop a relationship with the paper and just like the nature of it, and then the pigments, and figure out how they could like merge into with the painting. And so and that took about a couple years, before I crossed the two, because before I was making paper and I did collages on paper that I made, and then I slowly crept the paper into the paintings. Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, no, thank you for sharing that. And so, your career, the rise of your career, and has kind of coincided with this sort of significant attention that Black portraiture has received, particularly in contemporary art.
Mhm.
And obviously, there are many artists, some of which whom you've mentioned, like Kerry James Marshall, Barclay Hendricks, etc., who've
Yeah.
been working in figuration for decades. So certainly nothing sort of new there, but I do believe there are new things to say all the time if artists are bold enough to go there. So you mentioned how Black in your statement, not your bio, but like there's a statement that I read where you mentioned that Black portraiture has historically been underrepresented. And so, how do you see your work contributing to this conversation around Black identity in art? Is there something that you are saying
Hmm.
you felt that, or is there a conversation that you?
A
Hmm,
conversation that I sorry, repeat the last question. A conversation.
did I freeze?
Yeah, slightly. There was
Okay,
a
no
slight,
worries. Let's give it a moment. Yeah, no worries. Let's give this a moment to buffer because I think there may have been just a lag.
a bit of a.
But give me a like a hand wave if you can hear me okay.
I can hear you. Okay.
Okay, great. So
Yeah.
so so what I was saying is, or asking rather, is that so in your artist statement, not your bio, but in an artist statement that I read, you talked about the sort of underrepresentation of Black portraiture, and certainly there's been decades and decades of contemporary artists making images of Black bodies and Black people. And so my question is there something you felt needed to be said that you weren't seeing, or is it that you had this strong desire to insert yourself into an important conversation? That's my question.
Oh, it's a little bit of both. I mean, I feel like, when I found out, I like to say I found out because, like I said, when I didn't, when I came cognizant of this whole world of contemporary Black portraiture, something that was, you know, like really like not just making a lot of impact and just being widely more seen. It was kind of like something that I really kind of like connected to, just through the art historical context and being from New York, being African American, being a portrait painter. And so it was kind of like it kind of coincided with this thing where it was more so about what can you add to the conversation. Painting is very like, it's very like, what I learned, or what I've learned is that painting is so uh, long and expansive in terms of history. And so there's so many avenues and approaches to things that have been taken. And I was more so excited about just um, working with my own iteration of that same conversation. I mean, it really was a love of painting, of all painting, and kind of like thinking about, the Harlem Renaissance, Beaufort Delaney, Fauvism, and, that history and how it connects to the Harlem Renaissance, and thinking about Norman Lewis, and it goes on and on, and so it's kind of like, what were they experiencing? What were they feeling? How is it similar to me? Queer painters, Black painters, it just was very natural to me. So I kind of um, didn't focus too much on competing against it or thinking of something wildly different to do, but more so just my own iteration, which I knew was from a place of learning and just experiencing. So yeah, like yeah, it was more so something very casual. And I think, yeah, like one of my favorite, because I had a booth at the Armory. Am I okay? Is it I feel like there's a little bit of freezing. Are you frozen? Can you hear me? Oh, I'm good. Okay. But yeah, I had a review by the New York Times for the Armory. And, one of the things I liked so much was just about not only being listed as a standout, but kind of like talking about Black portraiture and how what is different in terms of the conversation I'm having. And so I like that because it was always from a place of you know um, just wanting. You do want to be different. You want to be unique. You want to be adding something. And I think that that is what every artist should do, no matter the subject. You're always supposed to be pushing and trying to do something, or bring conversations together. And so that's what I have been really wanting to do. Sorry, I think Dexter's frozen. Yeah.
All right, you should be good. Okay. Hey, can you hear me?
Can you hear me? Hello?
How I can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me.
Hey,
Okay.
how are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
I can hear
We're
you. I
back.
can hear you. Yeah, it's rare, but sometimes you have little technical things. So I can hear you perfectly fine. And apologies to any of the viewers who sort of experienced that lag along with us, but all these platforms that have existed for years are still not perfect.
Tell the truth.
Nevertheless, I'm happy that we will continue our conversation. So you and I have something in common. We were both from Brooklyn. I don't know. I'm certainly curious to hear about how your environment and upbringing has sort of found itself into your work, and
Mhm.
maybe you could take a moment and look at some of your paintings and talk about those.
Totally. As related to Brooklyn, like growing up in Brooklyn.
Sure.
Okay. Just so you know, there is a little bit of lag. Oh, okay. Oh, great. Oh, my work's here. um, so, yeah, I guess that has more so to do with, I think there is a feeling in New York, period, as far as painters. Like there is this kind of spontaneity and flavor and culture that kind of like is interwebbed, yeah, I mean, I grew up in the projects. I grew up in NYCHA housing in Glenwood, close to Canarsie, not exactly Canarsie. And it was like, a lot of murals and a lot of just like people outside, a lot of family. I mean, it was a family neighborhood, and so I mean you're just introduced to a lot of characters, so in those kind of settings. And I think that, like, at an early stage, like I always had very big eyes, and I was just very wide-eyed at a lot of things, and I just would look at the beauty of just the community and the trees and the buildings and the art diner that was there. For it's closed now, but those places that are sentimental, that you kind of attribute, that are mundane and sentimental, where it's like, just going to the public library across the street and just, um, like just being privy to, different forms of information. And so it's kind of like, I don't know. I feel like it just kind of like, and I went to public school, like, like I feel like it just kind of uh, like innately just like groomed me into this kind of uh, seeing, or painting, or handling, or my creativity. It's like ingrained, because I think it's interesting. One, portraiture that kind of it like champions people. It also records people. It mourns people. It's something that's like very universal. But coming from Brooklyn, it's just kind of like it's seeing how it's used there, and how it's, people really like, they're like, oh, that looks like this one, or that one looks like that one. Like there's a love there, and I feel like it's like from the community, from my community, the Black community, and also just like public spaces, and you know um, just growing up in that way.
Yeah, yeah. And before we get into talking about the work, because it just so happens that the title of this particular painting is the same as the title of your exhibition at the Gantt Center. So,
Hmm.
can you talk a little bit about Cherry and why your show is called Cherry? And then we can talk about this painting, Cherry.
Sure. So I was actually pressed on time to title the show, but I wanted to do something like kind of like a title track, like picking a painting that kind of like
Sure.
encompasses everything. Um, to me, in terms of just like its root and the feeling. A lot of the times when I'm titling something, it has more to do with the feeling that the word or the phrase or whatever what it brings to me, and what maybe it brings to other people narratively or just emotionally. And so Cherry was like just like and I there's like three different answers, because it was like I always talk about this children's book about eating cherries and spitting out the pits, and that was this children's book that I read growing up, and I always loved that book for its illustrations and but the story as well, because it had to do with this little girl that kind of like would eat cherries with her dad, and then and it was like a sentimental, it was like a bonding time with her father, and they would just always eat
Mm.
cherries and spit out the pits, and it was something very sweet and nostalgic, and and I really liked that. And so that's kind of like where I came to titling this, like because of the palette, of course, but also because of this kind of like, and this is a portrait of my mom, by the way. A young
Right.
portrait of my mom. And so yeah, it was like almost kind of like this um thing of just something short and frank and sweet, and something that's nostalgic, and has that tone, and kind of reflected the tone in this painting. And I thought of all the works in the show, this one was the one that would be like, I guess, you know the title track or whatever.
Right, right. And so let's talk about this particular work. So this is a portrait of your mom, and is it reference from a photo? Is this something from your memory? Is it a sort of a combination of both? And can you talk about the environment that she's in?
No, yeah, this is referenced directly from a family photograph of her from like I would say maybe the 80s. She was like maybe 16 or 17. Obviously, like the a lot has changed. Like, I mean, I put a plant in there, and that that landscape in the background, and the pillow, like those are all my add-ins, and the whole palette shift, and but the composition is from that photograph. And then as far as the other elements, yeah, those are like a yeah, just like a lot of different citations. Like the fabric in the pillow was from I got this African textiles book from the Baltimore Museum of Art, and it was like this big one. It's actually probably back here somewhere, and that particular pattern is called the men's cloth. I mean, that a cloth is called the men's cloth, but I really liked it, and I thought it would be good in the painting, so I kind of just referenced it in there. And then yeah, everything else was just collage and imagine, like the imagined landscape, um, and the bamboo and things like that.
Thank you. Let's go to the next image. I do have a question that's probably relevant to both the painting we just saw and the work that we're seeing now. Can you talk a little bit about your choice of colors? I mean, there's something very sort of specific about the palette that you're using, and I want to hear what is the thinking behind your choice in colors.
Yeah, I mean, color is like king to me. It has become even more king to me as of late. But it's like kind of the most, if not the most, but apart from the composition and the subjectivity and that meaning, but the color brings it out into this other place for me, and I'm getting more and more into that. But I think it actually comes from just that's where a lot of my experimentation happens, and where I'm referencing not only art history, but with the color. There's a way of there's a relationship to color that I didn't factor in when you're working with family images. Color can really take you places. That like emotionally, and just yeah, visually. And it is very organic, though, because it kind of like, I work in a very obviously collage paint. It's direct, there's no studies for the most part. I'm starting to do studies, one of my
Okay.
process woes. but just hitting the canvas and then just complementing one for the other. And so usually it comes, I work with typically more organic, yellow ochres, burnt umbers, browns, oranges, warmer tones. And so I was mentioning Fauvism earlier, but and Beaufort Delaney and Matisse and things like that, and Deron and things. And I kind of was like learning from their color, and that experimental color, that one that kind of goes into this more emotional and spiritual place. And it kind of like crept its way. It's been just creeping its way into my palette or just my choices. And so I just welcome that influence, really, because it's kind of like it's exciting. Really, it's like using that bold color, and kind of it takes it out of the timing. A lot of these photographs, like I said, the family photographs, they take place all through, the anywhere from the 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s. And so making a painting of that now, and making it now and making it contemporary, and making it an image that is like accessible in a way where you're not just dating it and you don't know the time. A lot of the time, which I like, is that people don't, apart from maybe the clothing or maybe the hairstyle, or even like, which I kind of lean into sometimes, when I'm really like into it. I love the 90s style and look. So sometimes I like to lead into that. But for the most part, I like, the hairstyles and everything to be shrouded or very timeless. And so it's just really thinking about a timeless image where, like if you look at, like a Carrie or something, you kind of like, you can't place in it. And it's kind of like taken to this portal,
Right.
it's void space. And so that's kind of like what I like to do with color and the image.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and it's interesting because there is a sort of you get the sense from, at least from many of the works that I've seen, that these are very personal images and intimate images, that you really do get the sense that even if you knew nothing about your career, you would assume that these are not people who are posing or modeling for a painting, but these are people who are living life, whose moments in time in life are being captured by an artist, which is a very different feeling than, say, a model in a studio that is sort of very sort of composed and ready for the camera, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I quite like that about the work. There's a warmth, there's a little bit of mystery of not knowing exactly the when and the where of it all, which is also quite fine and okay. I think for a lot of young, I'll call you young, for a lot of young artists that I know who are thinking about family and thinking about their experience, particularly for Black artists who are thinking about their experiences. There is a I will never use for this. I wouldn't use the term universality because I don't think that's the right term. There is a familiarity. There is a connectedness that you could very easily tell me that this is, a family in St. Louis, as much as you, and I believe that, if even if you told me it was a family in Brooklyn, or in Compton, or
Right.
in Atlanta,
Mm-hmm.
and there's something about going into the going to the old family album for Black people, particularly when you start looking at images from the 80s and 90s. There's something about those family albums that are, quite connected and familiar with one another across the country, which is, I think, is like quite fascinating to me. Yeah, yeah. You were about to say something about that.
Oh no, because yeah, as you were speaking, I was thinking, because yeah, like it's been insane. The actual there is a universality to it, because when you look at these type of intimate images, I was speaking with someone in India, from India, that was talking about like this also is from my living room. This is the I have these images, and so I think just as an artist and strategically, it's interesting because working with an image that is very accessible in that way. It's like a lot of people can connect to the family image, and it's a subject, or I mean a trope, or a concept, sorry, that has been used, throughout art history. But and it yields results when you look at Micheline Thomas and a lot of people working with family and their mothers and stuff. Like there's a meaning there and an ancestral importance and legacy, and which is very important towards my motivations as an artist. But like another thing is that families from all, like, just people, because everyone has a family, connected or non-connected, which I thought was another thing that was unique with these works, because I am young. And so a lot of the time, I wasn't around for these images, when they were being taken. And I wasn't around in the 70s and the 80s and the 30s, 40s, So I'm kind of like, there is a bit of a removal there, which I actually think has serviced the series. I've just tended to speak it more to as a series, because it's like very much tied together through that family, archive and source. But the me like I'm discovering or discovering these images and being inspired by them. They kind of like bring new insight for myself and for hopefully the viewer. And so it's kind of like just like an ideal um, uh, marriage, I guess, in terms of between the material and the subjectivity, and
Right,
and thinking about the viewer.
right, right. Let's move
Mm.
to the next image, and certainly want to make sure we can get through the images in the interest of time. So if I'm not mistaken, we were kind of looking at a detail of this image, or is this a separate painting?
Yeah, no, it's the same painting. It was the diptych, and so that first one was the right of it. So this is like the full image, two different canvases, but one piece, a
What
diptych.
what's the significance of the letters and numbers that seem to be floating in space?
Yeah, I get that question a lot, as you can imagine, and each time the answer is something the same, but also a little bit different. But it's kind of like an internal dialogue within the paintings, an abstraction, and also um, a departure from the image. So one thing I enjoyed from the start, I guess in terms of a bit of a background quickly, if I can. About the introduction to the letters and the numbers and the characters in the composition of the paintings started from my collaging initially. When I was doing the James Baldwin and the Lauren Hansberry works, those were very text artists, and I mean, there were authors, and so a lot of the time writing, I wanted to include it, and I was working with a lot of newsprint already, just with my own paintings. I was working with sitters, and I would just like include comic books or newspapers, magazines, like fonts. I was really concerned with the font and the look of the text, and less about the connotation. I found out more about my interest in uh, you know uh, font text and calligraphy at Yale. But before then, it was just a natural interest, thinking again about a lot of collage artists that has used text in painting. um, I won't mention again because I'm using their name too much. Ramar and Carrie, and
Mhm.
Jasper Johns, and thinking about that. And it wasn't until later that I kind of looked at Stuart Davis. And once I discovered Stuart Davis, and I was so glad I found him after. I found him during grad school, and it was kind of like, oh, okay, so I'm not being weird here. There is this history of text and painting. It's not like it's just like this, thrown in thing, and I had to kind of work towards, making it kind of like add to the image rather than distract. I did like when people said it disorients the viewer, because when you're working with accessible imagery like family photographs, it's like really nice to have something where people don't attribute their own expectations, like when you're getting to know someone or something, like you don't know them, but you kind of what's it call it always what's it call it are going to be having your own ideas of the portrait. I mean, it's preconceived ideal, and then the letters kind of confuse people, and so I like that kind of balance.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I quite like the interplay of the letters and numbers in what might otherwise look like sort of a domestic, traditional domestic scene. Those elements add a bit of mystery and start to sort of prod questions, sort of promote a different relationship with what one's seeing, and there's a certain surreal nature to those. And when one sees a bird on a sofa, I'd imagine that the bird wouldn't actually be on the sofa, but it's a sort of a reference to a memory or reference to some symbology that you're concerned with as an artist. Let's advance to the next image, and also want to talk a bit about the figures in this image. So if you can tell us, who's this a portrait of, and what is the scene we're seeing?
That is a cousin I don't like, and his father. um, but yeah, no, that's a family member. Um, and yeah, so that was your first question, or?
Sure, sure, sure. So
Mhm.
yeah, and the environment. So this is a sort of a memory from childhood, or again referencing photographs, family photographs.
Yes, the figures were referenced from the photograph I took in the gate, and the setting at the park, and then the top of the canvas I put there. And I think there was like some weird weedy back field or something prior, but I really wanted to do something with neighborhood, like a
Hmm.
neighborhood park scene, and it was kind of like an ideal image to work with that idea, because I was kind of like just trying to like add things like narratively, and things like the car, and and the gate being broken and things like that, or like where there's that tear, just like levels of seeing and information, just in terms of the composition. I composed it in a way to kind of, take you again these different places, But
Sure.
I really, go ahead. Sorry.
No, sorry to interrupt. I no, I was just agreeing, saying that I understand where you're coming from with that. Yeah, I totally understand. I mean, you mentioned, someone from India seeing your work, or maybe you were in India, I'm not sure, and how they said that there was a certain amount of familiarity, that they could kind of sense, that it's sort of like you're showing your family, but they can also see their family. And so I would love to hear a little bit more about your experience as an artist who now at this point in your career has been able to travel internationally on the strength of the work that you're making and interact with people from different cultures and backgrounds. And I'm curious to hear, what have some of the responses been to your work. And again, I mean, both positive and perhaps, maybe less positive. I mean, I assume if we live a life, not everything is always positive, but I'm just kind of curious to hear a little bit more about that. We'll advance to the next image in the meantime, but I'm curious to hear that.
Totally, totally. Yeah, I mean, like travel was something I was always really, interested in, for again the experience, which is so important towards the work, in terms of just living. Like, the more you live, I think it shows up in the work. But yeah, like I kind of was like in the shows and stuff. So I guess, yeah, I'll give you positive and negative, like
Yeah, sure.
I'll give you both. Yeah, I think, well, I'll start with the negative and with the positive. But I think there was like, there's a certain, like I remember in Kansas, there were, it wasn't, I won't say it was necessarily negative. I think they were saying like, oh, like, you're dealing with, the past, or like, this is just like a person who reached out via DM and saw me at the Nelson Atkins Museum, was kind of aggressive, I would say, and a white person. But she was like very like, kind of like, oh, like, these people are dead, and like, like, focus on someone now, like, not, this is depressing. Like, she found the work to be depressing, pretty much, and and that was, yeah, one take on it, which I'm like, um um which anyway, so yeah, so that was the negative. And then positively, from the same length, because I feel like there is something a little bit melancholy about the past and what is, gone, and kind of like, and working with family, a lot of members like this painting here, which is my Aunt Sandy, who passed in 2001. And I've been very attracted to the just images of her and just her life, and I again didn't get to know her. I mean, obviously I did, but like into my adulthood, I didn't get to know her. I was only knew her as a child, and looking at images of her life, and looking at her in these domestic spaces, and kind of like, why am I so inspired by that story? But I've always been very inspired by not sorry, I was about to say tragedy, but not tragedy, but more so the stories that are usually involve something tragic happening. I mean, there's a drama in life, there's a human experience, that there is, like, like you said, the bad and the good. So you can't have the good without the bad. And so the thing about memory and nostalgia, and where it's positive for me, where it may be triggering to some, is that, they teach you something, and you learn something new each time, and you also are connecting with your past and honoring your past, which I think is cathartic for me, but also could be for someone else. There's a reason why nostalgia has good and bad, connotations, because you tend not to remember things as they were, um, and you kind of like almost idealize a memory, whereas like, oh, you actually were very sad around this time, and but in your mind you're like, oh god, to be young, or like, oh, to be thinking about when I was playing football. You just have these your memories, and it's kind of like you have to have both, and I think it's a credit to my work. Actually, I'm happy about that comment, because a lot of them, are different than I think some Black portraiture, if I may say, where it's like, a lot about Black, we're like, powerful, or we're strong, and we're beautiful, or we're, happy, or, like really, what that's one thing I really liked about Lucian Freud's work, where it's like you went straight through that and to the human and to the experience. And so you're really thinking about life, and yeah, I think that is just working with my own personal family subjectivity has kind of like, yeah, lended itself towards getting to that point, connecting towards the
Right.
past, possibly building a future, which is what I think it is actively doing in terms of just my work and materially. So, you can't have the good without the bad. So I like all the responses. It's the interest
Yeah,
that I about. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, not knowing anything about the person, and let's advance to the next image, which I believe may be the final one. Not knowing anything about the person who you were referencing, who had that opinion about the work, well, certainly, it goes without saying, any viewer of an artwork is entitled to their opinion. Isn't necessarily important to tell the artist they should be doing something else. That's a whole nother conversation that I have strong feelings about. But I
Mhm.
will say what I will say is that, if your work evokes emotional responses in people, then as an artist, I think that's a wonderful thing. Whether those emotions are positive, neutral, negative, whatever they are for the viewer, that's theirs to sort of deal with and work through, and sort of understand that two people can look at the same thing and have two entirely different reactions to it.
Mhm.
Um, and certainly, I think in this day and age, what's interesting is that now more than ever, artists are, and whether you're a visual artist or a musician or any other sort of kind of artist, artists more than ever, are subjected to the opinions of the viewer or the audience, because of social media, because of the way that we communicate, and it's really important, sort of, to stay focused and grounded in your own mission, your own path. We so I'd love to hear a little bit about this work, and then I believe after this, we'll begin to conclude our conversation today. But please share what you can about Lenox Avenue.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Lenox Avenue is an indulgent work. I always start with indulgent because I really put in a lot of references in here just from art history and from other artists. And again, it's under the framework from a family image, a found image. I don't know this couple in particular, and it was a very actually very fuzzy image, and I had to kind of like bring some type of characters out of them, but I love the idea of this couple, in this dress, which again I styled myself. I think I'm going to
Right.
do some clothing because I, I got compliments on the outfit. That was just my collage thing, and I was like, that's actually a really cute jumper and top, and the outfits are cute. I think. But so yeah, it's like it really was started with this romantic image, and I was kind of like I wanted to do something referencing couples, or just the relationship in time and things like that, and again memory, nostalgia, history. Really, I called it Lenox Avenue because of the artists included. So we have William H. Johnson in the back, and Faith Reingold, and Horace Pippin, and Matisse, and Hopper on the right. Don't ask me if I did not mean to bisect and segregate racially any of the artists. It just happened to be that way. I got that at the Gantt Center, and I was like, no, it's not that. But yeah, like I was really just thinking about different paintings that I just love, and then also ones that kind of reference the painting that I'm painting. So it's like a painting with a painting. I love paintings within paintings, especially referencing other artists. And so, yeah, with this scene, it was like this idea of like selling these paintings on the street in Harlem or something. That's why I call it Lenox Avenue, because it's referencing, the obviously the cultural significance of Lenox Avenue during the Harlem Renaissance, and then it's also kind of talking about some of the artists that were working um, around that time. And so it's kind of like, yeah, it's playing on a few different things. And I obviously the horizon and those things were just taken out of um, the initial context and kind of brought to something else where I was thinking I do a lot of landscapes, and I think the street poles. Again, I was in the New York. This was for the Armory. So I was like very much like New York, New York, New York. I'm like, I was being really proud. And so I wanted to do something about with art in New York. And I didn't know until the Gantt Center, actually, the Matisse painting was actually a painting of a black female. And well, she's orange clearly, like in the actual painting, but I was attracted to that. I saw that at the Musée d'Orsay in Paris, and I just like took a snap of it, and I was like, oh, I feel like it belongs in this painting. So it was like a sample
Right.
painting.
Well, beautiful choice. So that'll conclude our slideshow, and I'm giving us an extra minute or so because we had that little little glitch in the midst. Um, well, thank you for sharing everything that you've shared about the work. And then now in this like final question, obviously a lot has been happening for your career. You have this fantastic exhibition at the Gantt Center. You've kind of shown internationally, but you still have a long road ahead of you. So just as a final question, like what are you looking forward to as an artist? Like what's keeping you excited and inspired?
Artists, in my books back here. This is what keeps me excited. The language, staying a part of it, being, just excited about things and making other people excited. It's like what I'm looking forward to. I really want to really use this time and this opportunity or this spotlight, so to speak, to really be pushing myself to be greater, to think bigger, and to but not just in the big ways, but in the small ways, and to really like tap into what I want to say, because I think that's what makes the best work. It's always like, if you have something important to say, then say it. And so I'm kind of like looking into what I find important and what I want to say. and yeah, like I want to be doing all types of stuff. I'd love to go into some installation and some abstract works and get my sitters back in here. Haven't had sitters since COVID. Right through grad school, I was yeah, kind of comforted by these images, and but yeah, so I'm kind of like interested in these different series that I'm interested in. I've been very interested in stickers and uh, collections of things, like elephant collection things and things like that.
Sure.
So staying inspired.
Well, listen, Khalif, thank you so much for today. I'm going to say our final words as we conclude today's program. Once again, very excited about your exhibition at the Gantt Center. Encourage everyone to go and see the show. And thank you for your generosity today. Again, Cherry is on view at the Harvey B. Gantt Center until August 17th, 2025. Thank you so much, Khalif, for joining us today. And I want to thank the audience for being here as well and bearing with us through a minor little technical delay. The Gantt Center's goal is always to provide programs that inform and inspire. The support of viewers like you allows the Gantt Center to expand its reach and further develop programs like today's Open Air. Please lend your support to the Gantt Center by texting "Give to Gantt" to the number 91999. Also, be sure to subscribe to the Gantt Center's YouTube channel for future programs and other video content updates. I want to thank you for joining us for this conversation today. I really enjoyed it, and look out for announcements about next month's Open Air. And at this moment, I'll just wish everyone safety and love and peace, and have a wonderful evening.